Compañeros, welcome to another edition of the SQL Data Partners Podcast. My name is Carlos El Chacon, your host, and I am joined today by Mr. Eugene Meininger.
Howdy, folks.
And Mr. Kevin Fiesel.
Hello.
If you are in the United States, we hope you had a good, nice, long weekend this last weekend. I know that we did. One of us, if you can guess who it was, one of us was LARPing about this weekend, and so that will be up to you.
For the record, it was not me.
Okay, so we've eliminated it one choice.
Carlos, you can just admit that it was you. I don't know why you have to put on this charade.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, that whole the Baby Yoda gives it away. He was LARPing. He was a stormtrooper.
I was outdoors beating people up with a foam sword. Since Carlos decided
Minecraft forever.
Yes, live long and prosper. Okay. Let's see. So today we want to talk a little bit about Power Apps. So we've done it. We did a seasonal series. Was it last week? 2 weeks. I guess 10 days ago. Anyway, so it'll be 2 weeks almost when the episode comes out. 2 weeks on Power Apps, and I thought it was interesting. I think it's timely. Lots of our community is data folks, data platform folks, and I was actually surprised by how many of them are they're having conversations about it. Right, you're hearing about it because again, the Microsoft marketing is working. And then now, their managers or other people, in other organizations, whatever, are starting to ask questions. And so we thought, okay, well, we've done a couple of Power Apps projects, and we thought, let's just talk through this a little bit, share some of our experiences, give you some terminology, perhaps, and then, and hopefully that's helpful as you're then having conversations, right? So again, part of the concept of the podcast is to share experiences as we interact with different technologies, and we thought this one would be appropriate. So let's see, episode 253. So our show notes today: SQLDataPartners.com/PowerApps or at SQLDataPartners.com/253. We are making our way closer to that episode 256, and we sent out an email. Hopefully, if you're on our podcast subscription list, you got an email saying, hey, come join us for episode 256. You can make a little video. It can be a sound recording too. Tell us what you think about SQL Server 2022. What's your feature? What feature you're looking forward to most? We're going to collect those and kind of make this a community edition. We'd like to do a community edition, episode 256.
And I don't want to spoil too much, but Carlos did promise a free car to everybody who submitted. Yes. I don't know if that was supposed to be public or not, but
Sure.
That's only for the insiders, right? But thank you, for making that public, Kevin. I appreciated it. We were a little low on submissions anyway. So
I mean, it's a Nissan Versa, but still street values right. At least dozens of dollars.
At least dozens. So now you may be a little bit like my friend Dan Watson, that was like, well, I don't really know what feature of 2022 because my vendor won't support it yet, so I'm not really looking forward to any of the episodes. So I'm going to make an audible. I'm calling an audible here, and hopefully Amanda doesn't kill me. But we can include. We would like to do a community edition, right? So if you could include Power Apps for that matter, something that you're looking forward to, or if you wanted to do a shout out, give somebody a shout out you've always wanted to give on the SQL Data Partners podcast. We would love to include that too. So let us know and make those recordings, send them in to myself. I believe Amanda's email was in the email that went out. If you don't have that, reach out to me and we'll get it. We'll get it to
or
you.
share your hottest takes and we'll rate your take.
Hey, there we go. That's true too.
We'll do it on the Scobel rating. So like this one's a Serrano. I don't know. It's not really a habanero level.
Oh man, I don't know, Kevin. You're the ghost pepper of hot takes, so it's going to be hard to beat you.
It will be. We'll be sure to have our ice cream ready, and just in case. Okay, so hopefully you'll participate in some way, shape, or form. We would love to do Community Edition, episode 256. We want to hear from you, right? Please take a second to record. It's okay. It'll be fine. So before we get into today's episode, we have a couple of Compagnieto shout outs we want to give. And we want to give shout outs to Jim Brooker, Marilyn C. Miner, Tim Smith, April Clossy, Robert Amenskua, Bruce Sanders, Jeff Orban, Mike Metzger, Amber Hansen, Isaac Gibson, Greg Huffman, Julie Rose, Heather Williamson, Ricky Beach, Jerry Candrilli, Marlo Paralata, Trish Bradley, Karen Clifford, Blake Donlinger, and Tom Nation to round out our list. So thank you, Compagnietos, for engaging with us on social media. We do appreciate it. And so if you ever want to say hello, we'll try to get you into the shout outs as well. Okay. So before we get into some of the hot takes that we were just talking about earlier, let me give the why, right? The why of why we are talking about Power Apps and why perhaps Power Apps has come forward at this time. So we see that organizations are still struggle keeping up with the IT requests that come to them, right? There's still quite a lot of paper processes. So per Microsoft or Dresner Advisory Services, 37% of organizations are still using paper to manage processes. Right? IT groups are still tend to be behind, to have a backlog of projects.
I just want to call out that the other 63% are lying.
Yes, that's right. Well, I guess it does say critical business processes, but I'm sure in terms of, if you take out that word critical, then yes, I'm sure that number goes way up. So now, right, with the Great Resignation, technical skills can be hard to find. There are just we talk about here in our podcast, right? All the different microservices that are coming out, right? Organizations or departments just continue to have these little small needs that don't necessarily they don't need an application for the entire business, but the marketing group, right? Or the legal group or whatever, the sales group needs processes that then generally need to feed into some other department, right? And a lot of times it's this cross-department communication that can be a challenge. And right, so Microsoft has said, hey, right, we know how to do this, right? We've got this great Azure platform. Can we create low code, right? It doesn't take you but 2 seconds to be searching up Power Apps and to hear the term low code. Low code solution, again, very similar to the Power BI perspective, is let's get this into the hands of users, let them create their own applications, right? Kind of get IT out of the way, and they can start, developing stuff and do these automations. So that's kind of where we are, and that's what the idea of Power Apps is. And I think it's a noble idea.
I think this is where I cut in with my concept that, yeah, it's a decent idea, but let me put it this way. Power Apps is sold as any yokel can put together an application, just bang together rocks until it comes out,
Right.
And that's what they sell it as. That, oh, well, okay, they don't sell it quite that way. They sell it as, well, people who are not developers can build applications really easily. It's drag and drop and a few buttons and maybe a line or two of code, and now you've got an app. Then you start to work with it and you realize this is the worst of Visual Basic from 2000 combined with the worst of modern web programming in 2022. It's, if you're in the absolute easiest path, yeah, you're fine. It'll work in the tutorial application. You want to make one small deviation from that path, and now you're digging through ugly properties lists. You're digging through nasty implementation details. And if you have to work at all with API management or with anything that hits, say, returns JSON, you're now desperately hoping that you can get Swagger docs, because if you can't, then yeah, go ahead and craft all of the interface code by hand, and hope that it actually works, because, well, sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. That's my experience with it as somebody who has not explicitly taken the time to learn Power Apps, but comes at it knowing enough about web development that I can bang rocks together and get an app to come out.
So I'd like to claw back a little bit of that. Maybe that's the wrong word, but
you can have as much of that take as you want, Carlos.
Yeah, we need to insert a term, and I'm going to call it the Microsoft Dataverse. So Power Apps is geared for folks who their data or their world lives in the Microsoft quote unquote Dataverse.
Right.
Which my definition, and you guys can feel free to dispute me, but my definition of the Microsoft Dataverse is I'm an Office 365 app, right? I'm in Teams, I'm in, even, I don't know about Outlook necessarily, but I'm in OneDrive, right? I'm in SharePoint. If my data lives there, then I think the Power Apps works as advertised. And you can do some really neat things, right? So my data is in Excel, right? I'm sharing Excel files with other team members, right? Or I do something in Excel, I do X, Y, and Z. I want people to stop messing up column C, right? Or, whatever it is. And I have a list of things that need to be updated. Okay, that can live in OneDrive, it can live in SharePoint. I can slap on a front end on that really quickly, put some permissions on it, and now all of a sudden I can do some pretty cool things. Right? Because I'm in the Dataverse bubble, right? Yes, where we tend to, the rails tend to fall. Well, I shouldn't say fall off. We've done them. I mean, it's where all of a sudden it's no longer the easiest, no longer a lot of GUI and automation. Is now I want to go outside of that. Now I want to connect to SQL Server. Now I want to, even to Power BI. I want to do, what you might think is quote unquote simple stuff, all of a sudden you introduce some complexity, and you are going to need, you're going to need some background. You're going to have to make the investment to learn the tooling, right? What the best way to do it is. And by the way, we're going to charge you more money because you're going outside of that process.
Yeah, that's a fair point. And I would say to give the petty definition of Dataverse is what you give to the people who aren't allowed to access the real databases.
Okay. Yeah, and that's fair, right? But I feel like, and again, maybe this is where we can argue about the marketing, but the idea is that this is supposed to be for those department level applications that that they need, but that aren't system or that aren't enterprise wide.
That's fair. Yes, this is true.
Kevin's itching to lose his MVP status. That's what I think's going on. He's like, how many hot takes can I make?
Power Apps MVP.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, never gonna get that. So I don't know if my take is as blazingly hot, ghost pepper Scobles as Kevin. For me, I tried playing around with Power Apps whenever it was first coming out. So when it was still fairly new.
In its infancy, sure.
Yeah, and my feeling was that if you wanted to do basic list-based manipulation kind of stuff, it was pretty good and pretty quick, right?
Right.
So if I wanted to make something where like for a while I was tracking games that I played, right? Doing something like
Sure.
that was pretty straightforward. I was able to pull information for some of our technicians about work that they had to do from a SQL database. That was pretty cool. Where it started to fall down was whenever they wanted to see like the related table. So if I was showing them work orders, they wanted to see all the line items for those work orders, right? And suddenly trying to figure out how to do what's effectively a join became very difficult. And essentially you had to do some kind of like you take some of these values and you do a search. And the problem is that anything there's a podcast I was listening to by some game developers that were talking about low code, no code. And essentially, low code, no code, a lot of what defines that is you've taken this extremely expressive language, this programming language, and by definition, you have to remove some of that expressivity.
Sure.
And what inevitably happens is you run into those situations where, okay, this wasn't planned for, this wasn't designed for, and you're suddenly out in the weeds. Like Power Query has the same issue where, it's mostly GUI-based buttons for all the stuff. But then whenever you can't do something normally with the buttons, you're plunged into this M code that looks like somebody like took all the punctuation from an alphabet set and just mixed it all up. It's kind of a pain. The problem, I think, at least in my opinion, is with things like access, it leaned into, okay, here's a real programming language behind the scenes if you really, really need it. And here's a really strong user interface designer. We're going to lean into the visual designer piece. And in my opinion, that worked pretty well. I know that Access gets a lot of hate, but in my opinion, the issue with Access was not the tooling, but the fact that we tried to combine a database or a pseudo database with a data interface with a programming language all at once in a file-based system that could be overridden or messed up or screwed up, right? To me, it was much more of a versioning issue and trying to combine too many things than it was with the tooling. The problem with Power Apps is whenever you need to go into that deep end, the deep end's real deep and real weird because you're dealing with this formula language like you would be with Excel or something like that, or like Kevin said, you're dealing with all these esoteric properties and that sort of thing. So and maybe a lot of it's changed. I haven't looked into it in a while, but that's kind of my big issue is the shallow end of the pool, really easy to use,
Really nice.
really nice, but it's not it's not that slope you have in most pools where it's okay, we're getting a little deeper. It's a cliff face.
It's a
right?
cliff, right?
Yeah.
So that rope is there for a reason, right? So like,
yeah,
and I
exactly.
think, in fairness, so this would be, and so in my mind, as we've kind of worked with, with organizations to talk them through or kind of walk them through Power Apps, is that is the delineation. So again, so if you're coming from an IT group and again, I'm just going to use the marketing group because that's
Sure.
work with the marketing group. Then and they're like, hey, we need this thing, and your IT groups, you guys are like, well, should we give them Power Apps? You need to understand, well, can they be self-sufficient in, again, the Dataverse, right? The Office 365 apps, or are they going to need to start connecting to some of these outside sources, even if it's outside, like applications? Now, you could circumvent some of that if again, on Salesforce or whatever, Dynamics or your CRM, whatever it is, if you want to start exporting that and that's what they work with. But again, now again, you introduced to systems and there's some complexities there. But in terms of is this going to solve my problem for me? Can I offload this from the IT group? I think you have to think long and hard about, well, is this can this be solved or contained in the Dataverse?
So
sure, and also brings up concerns that, all right, going with Power Apps, thinking about what enterprise readiness in the terms of how is that data going to be loaded? How is that data going to be managed, maintained? Who gets access to it? So controlling rights, controlling capacities, controlling roles and access controls off of them. And those are things that you can do. So I don't want to make it sound like, no, Power Apps can't do any of that stuff. But it is also the kind of thing that is historically an IT prerogative versus a business side, where the business side is, I can develop something, I got it to work, it is functional enough, ship it. But not necessarily taking full stock of the potential security ramifications behind some of the actions that are necessary. And so that's where that enterprise collaboration, that IT collaboration, is still going to become important.
Right. Now we should say, right, so because I never had the title of developer as a role that I've had, we shouldn't say, or I don't want to give you the impression that Power Apps can't do those things. So for our customer, we have a customer that we're doing. They had a paper process, and we're using actually AWS APIs to integrate with the app, and then the SQL Server database. Right. So it's fairly complex in terms of architecture. It's actually fairly complex, and Power Apps is able to do that. And then there are some limitations, whatever. So it certainly is capable, but I think again, what we're suggesting here is that IT is definitely involved, right? There are developers now as part of this process, and it is the pain point they're trying to solve by using Power Apps is the handheld, right? I need to put this on a tablet or a phone, and I don't want to manage the Play Store or the Apple, whatever Apple, the iOS store, right? I want to be able to have something that I can push out that everybody can use regardless of their device, and they can get security. I can put in some security to prevent them from accessing, or only give it to certain people, kind of a thing. But yeah, there could be some complications. So I guess that's again maybe a nuance, but something I thought was pertinent to bring up. So yeah, I mean, and the other thing I guess I should say there is that so if the marketing group does decide that they want to start and they can be all in the Dataverse, Power Apps can grow with you. Now again, right? Kevin, as Kevin mentioned, right? Like there are going to be some chaos. There's going to be some, not chaos. There's going to be some steps involved. But when you're ready to take that, and you're ready to go behind the rope at the pool and get bigger, Power Apps can grow with you. So it's not the fact that marketing has developed this thing and then you have to abandon it and create something else. In the event that it gets bigger, it will plug into more traditional development environments as needed, and you can grow it from there. Again, right, you're going to be paying for all of those pieces, right? But it is an option. So
yeah, and there are definitely benefits to the tooling. Like being able to just have a mobile app that just works is a big deal, right? Like that's an expensive thing to create and maintain normally. Like that's a huge deal.
Right.
And being able to have some type of application system where a lot of the infrastructure support is taken care of is a big deal, right? Like you and I are working on a project with a customer and they need to be able to do some manual data entry, and they're going to have to do some ASP.NET MVC development on their end, right? And it's like, okay, that means there needs to be a server somewhere, and there needs to be a page that someone knows where it is, and all this kind of stuff. So I think there's a bunch of benefits. I think my disappointment is I was really hoping that it was basically going to be Access 2.0, but with mobile support and version control. And it was going to be a simple way to solve the perennial problem of Susan in accounting needs to be able to insert this information into a custom table on a weekly basis. We don't want to have to write a whole web app to do it, and we don't want to give her SQL Server Management Studio. So how do we solve it? And historically, a lot of that has been a thin client access database that has no data in it, and it just has a couple connection strings, right?
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So there. I agree with you there that it's not quite that, and it looks like just from the again the way that you have to pay for it is that they're not necessarily looking to solve that problem either, right? Because they're going to charge you for the custom connectors, right? Are now a thing, and if you want to go outside, right, you're going to pay for it, and
you're paying for premium connectors. Yeah,
that's right. Now, will that integration get better? Like, yeah, even to your point, kind of working with SQL Server, right? Which you feel like, well, it's y'all's product, right? Like, if I'm working with SQL Server, it means I've purchased it. You would think that would be,
yeah.
I don't know if more approachable is the right word, right? But
sure.
Yeah,
Yeah, you'd be surprised at the number of people willing to live in a SharePoint list. I'll be honest.
Sure.
So
right.
I think it's definitely still workable. But yeah, the licensing, like, Power BI gets heat for confusing licensing. But from what I hear, Power Apps kind of takes the cake there. And I think it's only just recently that I believe they added some way to have licensing that isn't just per like active user kind of thing. Because you think about it, okay, we're making a mobile app. Well, can I treat it like a regular mobile app? It's like, no, you need to make sure that each of these people have a Power Apps license. And that doesn't work for every kind of use case. It certainly doesn't work for any kind of like public facing app you might want to do or anything like that.
Oh yeah. No, I don't think that the intention is that these are public facing. I could be wrong, but that's not my
no. I mean,
impression.
It's not the intention,
Okay.
but there's a gap there, right? And that was a gap that Power BI solved over time, where they created premium capacity, where you could license by capacity instead of per user, right?
Yeah, or the embedded lower level.
Exactly. And Power Apps, there's places where that makes sense, right? Like you can imagine at SQL Trail, maybe you want to make a calendar app or an event app or something like that that's not particularly fancy, but allows people to like select the sessions they want or register or leave comments or something, and you don't want to pay somebody $100,000 to make something custom. If you have somebody in-house who can do that kind of stuff, there's situations where somewhere in the middle makes sense, or at the very least something that can be accessed with maybe not complete random people. Like no one's going to put this on the Google App Store, but you might have events, you might have vendors, you might have contractors, all these sorts of things, or low frequency users. That was an issue with Power BI. Is like, what do I do about the situation where I want a report this user can access quarterly, and they don't really need to pay $120 a year just for that privilege, right?
Right.
So we will see. I've heard they're making strides in some of that direction, which is good.
So over the past year, the licensing changed a little bit. They did add one additional option. But basically, if you're not familiar with licensing, there's a per user plan, $20 per user per month. All the Power Apps that you want, you just pay $20 a month. Yep. Or if you only have one or two Power Apps, you could say $5 per user per month. So that's the
$5 per app.
Yeah, per app per user plan. So if you're 4 or more Power Apps, it makes 0 cents to go on that model. You go the $20 flat rate. Right. Or they have a third plan that came out about a year ago, which is $10 per active user per app per month. And what they do with that is, if Eugene, Carlos, and I are all potential users, let's say there's one Power App, and if we use it every month, it just makes sense to pay the $5 per user per month. But Carlos, being the big boss, only shows up once every 6 months just to remember that he has to change his credentials. So in his case, 5 of those 6 months, he's not actually checking out the application. So why pay $5 a month for him not to use it? And instead, you pay $10 on the 1 month where he does use it. Or if I'm using it every day, because clearly we know how much I love Power Apps by now. Obviously, that makes sense to just pay outright for that. But yeah, so the pay-as-you-go plan is basically $10 per active user per app per month.
I'd be interested to see how many people actually have gotten that, because the biggest problem, I mean, again, it's the same with Power BI, right? But it's like you're going to make it, but you really don't know who's going to use it. And maybe you can convert later, right? But it always feels like you need to kind of assume that everybody's going to use it and then kind of go from there. Because the worst thing, like, well, maybe not the worst thing, right? But as soon as somebody tries to log in, they don't have a license, right? Then all of a sudden their desire to use it is going to take a hit, and it can be problematic. So I'd be interested to see how the pay-as-you-go model. Obviously, somebody requested it, right? But are they actually using that long term? I'd be interested to know.
Yeah, you'd be surprised the weird edge cases large enterprises run into.
Yeah.
Like it's just so funny that stuff like Power BI Premium, like you from the outside you're like, who cares about this stuff, or who cares about these features or whatever, and then you talk to like people on the product team and you're like, these enterprise features are extremely important for the life of the product. It's funny. So it wouldn't be surprising me if there's some people using it and it's a really important customer, and so that's why they've made that available.
That's right. That's right.
Oh, sure. I can easily see any of those three options being a reasonable option for a company. And again, it's just a matter of knowing enough information in your company to make the right choice. And you can switch between them. So you could go per app per user and switch that to just flat rate per user once you realize that, oh, there's 8 applications that the whole company is using because they've just adopted Power Apps.
Right. Yeah. So where it makes sense, and again, particularly if you have a paper process and you need to be able to share information with other organizations, other departments. So Department 1 generates it, but has to send it to Department 2. Right? Power Apps can be super helpful, and I think there's a compelling case. However, you must know, right, going into that it is going to have a little more complexity than, hey, let me point to an Excel sheet in OneDrive and make an application. And I think as long as you're aware of that, then right, you can make, hopefully that's helpful, right, from a decision making process. So, I will say, so Microsoft has put out some things just in terms of, return on investment and reduction in app development costs, and that when you're able to put in some of these pieces, those are real numbers or real benefits that people are able to get back in. Hey, I don't have to keep up with this Excel list anymore, right? I've now put it in an app. I don't have to worry about, hey, who updated this or who, overwrote it, or, those kinds of things. I can put some of that logic into the app and save real man hours. So yeah, so as always, compañeros, right? I'm interested to hear what your experience has been. Where are you going? What are you being asked about Power App? What kind of conversations are you having? Love to get that feedback from you. And heck, if you need to, right, record it, and we'll get it into episode 256 if we have to. So, I guess so. Last thoughts as we wrap up here today.
Yeah. I mean, that's my official thought.
Yeah, indecisive grunting, I think, is a good last thought in this case.
Yeah. So I guess I will say, so again, because we've done some Power Apps projects. If you are looking for a mobile, you are looking to build an app that's mobile ready, and either can live in the Dataverse, right? Then all of a sudden that's very approachable. If you need to go outside the Dataverse and connect to something like SQL Server, just know there are some hurdles. It can be done. You can make some very nice looking websites or applications rather. Just know that you're going to need more resources than just the marketing, right? Technical person to get that done.
Yeah, and IT people realize that you're not going to be able to just jump in and have it automatically work.
Right.
That you're going to have to learn.
Yeah.
If you go into there, because it's not trivial and intuitive.
So, okay, very good. Thank you, compañeros, for tuning in today. As always, we want to hear from you. If you want to reach out to us, Mr. Eugene, how can folks contact you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at SQLGene, or you can read my blog at SQLGene.com.
Mr. Kevin.
So I've started up a service where for $5 per social media handle per month, you can learn that information, or you can get all the handles for $20 a month.
I feel like maybe you got that from somewhere. Let's see. Compañeros, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm at Carlos El Chacon. If you do connect with me, if you haven't, please do so. Just let me know you're listening to the podcast. That will help ensure that a more timely response. If you are in front of a windshield and you made it this far, congratulations. Safe travels to you. And we'll see you.
And watch out for that tree.
Yeah, on the SQL Trail.
All right.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
SQL Data Partners.